As we begin our discussion on postmodernism and modernism, objectivism versus subjectivism, I figure it's a good place to start to identify these terms. What does it mean to be objective or subjective or modern or postmodern? It all started with a guy named Descartes and his objective search for truth. You may be familiar with his famous statement, "I think, therefore I am." What he's doing is he reduces all possible knowledge to the one thing that he can know for certain and starts from there to build all other things that he can know for certain. This is called objectivism, or modernity is founded on this principle. Now the postmodern and subjective says there is nothing objective that we can hang our hat on and start in a discussion from. My perception of things is entirely unique and colored in certain ways that are different from the way that you see them, but the way that I see them does not invalidate the way that you see them. Now, there's no real official spokesman for the postmodern movement or a specific beginning point for the postmodern movement. However, a guy like Nietzsche would very well encapsulate the philosophy and thought of the subjective viewpoint, that because there's nothing objective that we can all agree upon, hang our hat on, and say we all experience in this way, it would lead us to live in such a way that is free from any of those assumptions or influences. And he described these people who are fully free as the Ubermen. So that's a good start. Now, an interesting aspect of this discussion is the science of it all. Because for a long time, there was a lot of objective approach to science. But as we've seen, there are significant advances in the area of specifically quantum mechanics that show that the universe actually behaves in a very subjective way. A very good example is Schrodinger's cat. Now, Schrodinger was a scientist who, one, didn't like cats, but two, was looking for a way to describe a specific aspect of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. And what he said was, if you had a cat and you sealed it up in this box, and it was sealed up, there was no way that you could perform any experiment to see inside this box, and you took this box and you shook it up violently, you just shook it, and you set it down, you had no way to tell if that cat was alive or dead. And because you had no way to tell, the cat was somewhere in between alive and dead. And actually, by opening the box to check, you are determining if that cat is alive or dead. Now, that sounds very, very weird to those of us who come from a very objectivist mindset. But in fact, scientifically, that's what we experience. And all experiments have proven that that is the case. So it's a very good analogy. What I want to point out, though, is while you can't take, scientifically speaking, a purely objectivist position, you cannot take a purely subjectivist position either. So for instance, while subjectively my experience determines whether or not the cat is alive or dead, my experience cannot determine whether or not there's going to be a rhinoceros in the box. Let me put it another way. My subjective experience doesn't reign. It is not the controlling factor. It is a factor. And so for those who take a purely subjective approach, so if there was some crazy guy who looked in the box and saw a rhinoceros, we would say, very rightly, you are crazy, because there's no way that there could be a rhinoceros in that box. There could only be a cat. The state of the cat is what is in question. And this is why the video that you saw at the beginning, the quick video, is kind of the controlling image for this topic. Because, yes, you have one guy walking in, another guy walking out of a door, and then you got this other guy who thinks that the door is a little bit farther over than it actually is, and he runs smack into a wall. Now, it's certainly true that he is subjectively interacting with his surroundings. He might have broken his nose. That wouldn't have happened if he didn't run into that wall. He might have left a dent in the wall, depending on if it's concrete or drywall or some other, rice paper or bamboo or something like that. But it doesn't change the fact that that door was in another location. And so this video is basically just an appeal to those who think that the world is purely subjective to understand that your subjectivism is not God. It doesn't entirely control your surroundings. It certainly has an effect, but it's not the guiding principle. And for those of you who are purely objectivists, understand that you can interact with your surroundings and that your presence changes the way that things are interacted with.